It all started with a sound, or rather, the lack of one. You know that satisfying, comforting snick of a key turning in a lock. The one you take for granted every time you head to your workshop, your personal sanctuary? Well, on that day, that sound didn't happen. Instead, I heard a dull, infuriating clank. I froze, the key halfway turned, and I just stared. What I was looking at wasn't my old, trusty brass lock. No, that had been replaced with something else. Something monstrous. A chrome-plated discus lock, the kind you'd find on the doors of some sketchy warehouse in a shady industrial park. It was chained to my gate with a chain so thick, I swear it looked like it was stolen off a ship. And I'll tell you right now, that wasn't just a new lock. That was a statement. A declaration of war. I'm what you might call a dedicated hobbyist. The neighbors over in Oakwood Estates, well, they probably think I'm just a guy who tinkers with cars. But they don't know the half of it. The truth is, my garage, which I lovingly call the lab, and the big workshop at the back of my property, are my sanctuaries. They're where I create things. Not just anything, though. These places are where the magic happens, where I can go wild with my tools and machinery. The scent of sawdust and solder fills the air like the world's best potpourri. For the last 6 months, I've been working on what I call my magnum opus. No, it's not some hot rod or a fancy piece of furniture. This is something with more soul. I was building a platoon of animatronic garden gnomes. Yeah, you heard that right. Animatronic garden gnomes. But these weren't your typical, cheesy, red-cap guys with fishing poles. No. These were high-tech marvels. Each one had a custom-coded personality. One would tip his little red cap, another would polish his glasses. And Bartholomew, my personal favorite, was designed to look like he was telling a long, fascinating story with hand gestures. I was building these for the annual charity auction for the local children's hospital. Every year, they have this big fundraiser, and I had a goal me gnomes were going to raise a boatload of money for the kids. The microcontroller work was delicate, done in my lab. But the heavy lifting, the fabrication, the painting, the waterproofing, that was all happening in my workshop. And then came that perfect Saturday morning. The sun was out. It was beautiful. I needed one last can of sealant to finish Bartholomew's weatherproofing coat. So I walked out to my workshop, ready to finish the job. But, you guessed it, what I found wasn't a key unlocking my gate. It was that stupid chrome discus lock. I stared at it for a second, then my eyes flicked to the note that was zip-tied to the chain. Bright white paper, laminated like it was a document for a CEO. And then, I saw the logo. The Oakwood Estates Homeowners Association. Of course, I thought. It's Brenda. Now, if you don't know who Brenda is, let me fill you in. She's the president of the HOA. A woman who patrols our streets in her golf cart like some sort of Cold War border guard, making sure every blade of grass is the right length and that every trash can is tucked away before 9 a.m. Once, she tried to find me because my garbage can was visible for longer than 4 hours after pickup. 4 hours. As if that's some kind of federal crime. But this was something different. I read her little note. She claimed my outbuilding was being used for activities that were inconsistent with the character of the neighborhood. She mentioned industrial deliveries me gnome-sand noises that didn't fit the residential vibe. What did she think I was doing? Manufacturing missiles? I could feel my blood starting to boil. This wasn't about bylaws. No. This was about power. And Brenda was flexing it. So there I stood, seething with rage, staring at the lock and that ridiculous laminated notice. My first thought was, I'm moving to a cabin in the woods. But then, something inside me clicked. That's when the real idea began to form. Brenda had made a classic villain mistake. She assumed I was just some guy who liked to play around in his garage on weekends. She didn't know that I was an engineer. I didn't see rules as boundaries. I saw them as puzzles to solve, systems to manipulate. She had just locked me out of my workshop. But she had no idea what she was about to lock in. I looked toward my main garage, where under a massive gray tarp sat something just waiting for its moment. The Mobile Command Center. The MCC. It wasn't just a vehicle. It was my weapon. I didn't grab a lawyer, didn't even think about grinding that lock to dust with an angle grinder, even though the temptation was real. No, I needed something elegant. Disproportionate revenge, but perfectly legal. I walked back into my lab with purpose, flicking on the lights, and there it was. My white whale. My 20,000-pound instrument of precision-engineered spite. The MCC was a thing of beauty. It started life as a Ford F550 chassis, the kind they use for ambulances or fire trucks, but I turned it into a sleek, matte black monolith. From the cab back, it was a custom cube made of powder-coated aluminum, with solar panels on the roof and a satellite dish for internet anywhere. It had lithium-ion batteries to power everything, and enough tool chests and compartments to make a locksmith jealous. It wasn't just for off-grid camping or disaster relief. Oh no, it was built for a situation exactly like this one. And then, with a smug grin, I activated it. I didn't rush. This wasn't just about getting back at Brenda, it was about sending a message. I got in, started the engine, and felt the ground shake as the diesel roared to life. With a push of a button, the MCC's back ramp lowered with a hiss. The neighborhood didn't know what was coming. I drove it onto the street, right there, in front of my house. And Brenda? She had no clue what she was in for. My recreational vehicle was perfectly legal, registered, and parked right where I was allowed to park. But the fun part? I started playing the world's most irritating corporate hold music through the external speakers. And I didn't stop there. I began projecting things onto the side of my house. Kittens, fireplaces, all kinds of nonsense that I knew would get under Brenda's skin. Within hours, the neighborhood took notice. People stopped. They waved. They took drinks from the cooler I'd set up on the curb, and I started to feel like the hero of my own suburban drama. Then came the inevitable confrontation. Brenda couldn't take it anymore. She called in the cavalry, 2 police officers from the local station. She thought this was going to be the end of me. But I had my facts. I had every piece of paperwork. I showed the officers the perfectly legal registration of my MCC, the city ordinance allowing me to park there, and just for good measure I showed them the laminated note Brenda had left on my gate. The officers? They weren't impressed. They told Brenda to back off, and to her shock, they actually sided with me. But the war wasn't over yet. The HOA still had its sights on me, and Brenda wasn't done fighting. She called a meeting, an emergency meeting to vote on taking legal action against me. She thought she could take me down at the HOA meeting. She thought I would be defeated. But that's not what happened. I showed up prepared, with a PowerPoint presentation. I had the facts. I had the photos, the dates, the violations, and yes, even the threats Brenda had made to me. I had it all. And in front of the entire HOA, I laid it out. Brenda thought she was the queen of Oakwood Estates. She had the HOA behind her. She thought she controlled everything. But in that moment, she was exposed. Her empire crumbled. The board members voted her out. She was done. And me? Well, I was victorious. I didn't just win a battle. I won the war. In the end, life in Oakwood Estates returned to normal. The new HOA board was much more reasonable. And Brenda? She was a ghost. Her reign of terror shattered. But just to remind everyone who won, I kept my wall of shame a public display of every single violation notice she'd ever sent me. It became a symbol. So what do you think? Was Brenda just doing her job, or did she take it too far? Would you have fought back like I did, or just let it go? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's talk about it. What would you do if you were in my shoes? And don't forget to share this story with your friends. Because sometimes, the underdog does win. And when they do, it's one heck of a story.